Here we go. Ciao, Lyndon.
How are you, Sarah?
Good,
My
good.
head is a little small.
I was just explaining that I came back from the mountain after 62 days of quarantine there, and I'm now in Milan, and I have another 14 days of quarantine. We literally have not been out, so it's nice to be home. I have to say that home sweet home is really true.
It
So,
is true. It is true. It is true. It is a different world that we live in today, isn't it?
my
Um,
goodness. So where are you? You are in Shanghai?
I am in Shanghai. I came back about a month ago. I actually left Shanghai end of January.
Oh, okay.
Actually, at the height of the virus here, partially because we actually had prior commitments. We had a competition that we had to attend to. We had presentation.
Where about the competition?
So we went to the Middle East. I
Oh,
went to the
okay.
Middle East.
Okay.
Rosanna flew to Spain, and we went to the Madrid Design Festival because we had a lecture there and an award. And we had to go to Porto to see our product for, at that time, was preparing for Milan. Obviously, that went, and that's no longer relevant.
Okay.
And we went to the US to present. Actually, we went to Design Indaba in Brazil. So we were gone for a while during the height of it, but then we came back just about a month ago. And so we've been practically quarantined
Since
and
then.
since then, yeah.
But so you went basically in Spain just before the crisis, if I understand.
Yeah,
Right?
before the crisis, and I think it was interesting our timing because when we left,
Mm.
we didn't really know we had prior commitments, and if we did not leave actually for Tokyo and for the Middle East, we probably would not have been able to leave China.
Of course.
But we've already set this for about, we had a plan to leave for 6 weeks in different countries. So between Rosanna and I, we were already traveling in different places. But what was daunting was we were presenting in Minnesota.
Mm.
And then I went to Boston to do some business. And Harvard announced, that was the first day when Harvard announced that they were closing their school.
Wow. So what was
And
the reaction of the people? You were there, so.
we panicked because our daughter is at Harvard,
Oh my God.
her freshman year. So I panicked. And so they were given 5 days, and I happened to be there. So Rosanna and I had to quickly help her pack and unpack and all that stuff. And within a week, we had to fly back here.
So they're all back with you, your kids are now? They're all in China?
Two kids. The oldest is still in the U.S. studying.
Okay.
He's in upstate New York. He couldn't come back, but we managed to get 2 of them back. So we're really grateful. But obviously, it's a different world. She came back, and all of us came back, and immediately we got tested. And you've been to Pudong Airport, no,
Of
Sarah?
course, of course.
So the whole airport is like a big hospital. They turn
Okay.
it into a really strict, and it was very good. You actually feel safe.
But what does it mean? You come back and what they do? They try your temperature and what else they
They
do?
not only do that, there's 3 stages. They ask you a lot of questionnaire, and then of course they test your temperature. And then what happened is you cannot get into your own car.
Okay.
You're designated into districts, and what happened is then a bus would pick you up.
But
And then you would go to different places, and then they would take you to a gym-like structure, and then you would get tested.
again, but it's
And
temperature or they actually try some,
swab. They
okay.
take
They
a
do temp,
swab on
they
your
do a
mouth
test.
and your
Okay.
nose. And
Okay.
so we were all fine, but my daughter was tested positive.
Oh, wow. I didn't
So
know
she was
that.
taken. It was actually very difficult for us,
Of
both
course.
Rosanna and I, because about a month ago, she was taken away from us completely to a hospital, and
So
we
she
couldn't
was
see her.
put, she was separated by everyone else?
And we were also separated. Every single one of us were separated. We were all in different hotel rooms.
So
and that's for 14.
how long did you stay in the hotels for?
2 weeks.
2 weeks in separate
Yeah,
hotels.
separate hotel rooms. We cannot
And
see each other.
and your daughter was okay after, or was it difficult?
She suffered. She struggled a little bit, so that was it was very difficult for us. But I think because she's young, she recovered. So about 2 weeks ago, she was discharged, and then she was taken home. But then she was quarantined for another 14 days. So it's been a month.
So you really lived COVID-19 really
Yes.
on your skin.
Yeah, I think she got it from school. I think at Harvard it was quite crazy, the situation there. I think a lot of people, but you know, we live in a challenging time, and it was interesting because I was flying from Japan. There was no direct flight from the U.S. I was flying from Japan to Shanghai, and that morning I was reading, I was reading Proverbs in the Bible, and it's interesting. It's chapter 14:26. It talks about the fact that if you fear the Lord, you will have a safe refuge, or you will have a safe fortress, and in that fortress, your children will find refuge in them. I did not know what's going to happen, but I think in many ways, my Father up above was making sure that I was taken care of, preparing me, because 3 hours later we were hearing the shock of our life, both Rosanna and me. And so I think it's important in times of difficulty to understand that, no matter how intelligent we are, no matter how knowledgeable we are, no matter how connected we are, no matter how much wealth we are as humanity, we are frail. And this life we live is really short.
And this is a really important point that I would like to elaborate with you, Lyndon, about what's going on now in China, and maybe in Shanghai, but also in other cities. And after, maybe we can talk a little bit about what do you think is going to happen, how places are going to be transformed, how the sharing economy is going to be transformed. So I just want to get your views and your thinking of what's happening today and what you think is going to happen tomorrow.
I really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I do know what's happening today, and I think we all are being self-reflective about what home means. During those days when I was stuck in a hotel room, one room, I can't even come out of the corridor. The idea of hospitality changed in my mind. I was stuck in my house for another 2 weeks. And all of a sudden, our sense of domesticity is stretched. It's no longer just a place to sleep, a place for private conversation, a place for respite and refuge. All of a sudden, your house is now the restaurant. You're buying food to take out. Now, all of a sudden, your house, whether you like it or not, is a theater, because maybe your daughter or your wife likes to hear classical music. The other one wants to hear something and they blast it so loudly. So sometimes it's a movie theater, right? All of a sudden it's school because they're doing online teaching. So all of a sudden that typology of the sense of home is stretched to its limit, its capacity. And
have you changed anything in your house since this? Did you modify to adapt to your new needs, or not really?
We have to. Our house is very flexible to begin with. We always have many tables in our houses. I mean, in our house, and so we do. It's just it's not so pristine anymore, which is fine. It's really activated, but it's really stretched to its limit. All of a sudden, public is taken inside, and you can't really go out as much. And it reminds me of, I don't know if you've read this book, Sarah, and I read it the second time during the quarantine. An amazing fiction writer by the name of Philip Roth.
No, I didn't. I'm going to write it down as my,
yes.
every time I want to read something.
American Pastoral.
I know.
And it was set, of course it's fiction, it was set in the 60s during the height of racial tension in the Vietnam War, and how this individual who's immigrant of Swedish background, Swedish Jewish background, was in Newark, and he was the typical all-American individual growing up, and yet during that whole tension, his daughter decided that she hated the idea of war and went into this whole revolution and had created a bomb and hurt someone and escaped and managed to escape. 5 years later, the father met the daughter. I believe her name was Mary, if I remember it right. But of course, the father loves the daughter, would not tell anyone what the real situation is. At the same time, he was finding out that his wife was having an affair. And all of a sudden, the whole American Pastoral, the idea of this pasture, this amazing, beautiful setup that's considered from an outwardly point of view, this beautiful family, beautiful setting, seems like everyone's accomplished, is now at the brink of destruction. And he is in this state of confusion and state of sort of denial, but at the same time realizing, is this what everyone is feeling? And I have a feeling this sense of home for all of us has that same notion, this idea that our home is this beautiful refuge, it's stretched to its limit. You know?
I love this idea of refuge, but also theater. There are people feeling it as refuge, and some people feel it as a prison. It's interesting how everyone is living this situation in a different way. But from the Western world, we hear a China that is recovering, people are going back. Do you feel that there is still a sense of fear, or in fact now there is a kind of need to look forward and hope for the best?
I think slowly. I can't speak on behalf of cities like Wuhan, which was hit the hardest. But definitely, I think there's a certain optimism. People are still very careful. Everyone's still wearing masks. I'm not wearing masks right now, but then as soon as I step beyond my door, I have to wear a mask. People are very conscious about washing their hands. Definitely, people are taking it very seriously. This whole social distancing is still still very much relevant.
But are you going to restaurant? Are you going to malls? Are you going?
People are. People are, but obviously it's a lot stricter. So everyone on their phone. There's not a lot of what we call civil liberties, perhaps, but in times like this, it's actually
good.
It's quite comforting, because what happened is you need to scan your phone, and then they can tell whether you're green, yellow, or red. If you're red, you should be in a hospital. If you're yellow, you should be quarantined. If you're green, you're free. So everywhere you go, they scan your phone.
Okay.
If not, you can't go anywhere.
Okay, that's interesting, because there's a lot of talking in Italy, and I'm sure there's a lot of talking in other countries, and there's a lot of people that are following from around the world, and we're all a little bit puzzled, because communication is very confused. You hear everything and the opposite of everything. But Lyndon, are you thinking or reconsidering, the idea of spaces? What are you thinking in this moment of after COVID? In really your idea of thinking about architecture and thinking about spaces and.
Actually, it's interesting, Sarah, you should ask that question, because the idea of spaces, obviously for architects like us, they're very important. But for me, I think it forced me to think deeper, because when I was at home, I start noticing all the things that are wrong with my home. Right? For instance, the corner of wooden baseboard that was eaten by the termite. I had the termite taken care of, but I never repair it. the frame of the door that's already damaged. I never really repair it. There are a lot of light bulbs that went out. I never really changed them. Some of my heating system are not as well as it should be. I didn't really take care of them, but I started noticing them when I'm at home. Even though I'm working, it became my everyday. And all the subtle things I started noticing all the things. And I realized, and it's also this last 2 weeks, we changed our front gate. Yeah, because it's been dilapidated beyond recognition, our gate. So now finally it was perfect time. But having said that, it made me realize more than the physical space. And it reminds me of Heidegger's thinking about dwelling, building, dwelling, and thinking. Mm-hmm. Is the shelter, the sense, is shelter alone our dwelling? Is it really dwelling? And it really made me think about the idea of our house as a metaphor, as an analogy of our house within.
Of course.
And it is during times when we are forced to really think about ourselves, we start thinking about all the things that we actually have to correct within. Mm. There's a lot of things, I think, before we even start changing spaces. I think there's a lot of emotional and internal spaces that we need to correct within. I think it is only until we change that inner being, that sense that we actually, as humanity, we have to take care of, as Heidegger calls it, the sense of dwelling means humanity has this responsibility to the earth that they are in.
And there's a fantastic message of someone that is following us from Japan saying, flowers arrived today, I'm happy. I think it's like talking about, there's also the nature is helping us to reconsider inside these messages coming out from there. But talking about the internal and external, there's another question that we've been asked, and I think is really about this, is the presence of soul in the spaces. So when you Rosanna, design spaces, how do you inject that soul and that spirituality that is so important for you and for us?
Yeah, I think as much as being trained as architects, there's a tendency to maybe spend a lot of time on maybe the exterior or the object or the form of the architecture, but our background, and I was taught by Rafael Moneo at Harvard, and he was really adamant about the idea of the section and the idea of that spatial relationship of man and the building. And I thought that was really helpful. I think when I was in school, that didn't really sink in, but slowly as I start to practice, that became very apparent to me and become even more important as we start to understand ourselves and understand the clients that we are working with. And so it's important that we design for the people that we are building for. And I think the section is very important, how light comes in. But then again, Heidegger says, just light and the ventilation and all that quality is not good enough to define building as dwelling, right? So what is it? And I think we all are struggling with that question. And I think it's a perfect time right now to really think deeply about sort of the meaning and purpose of what we're doing.
But sorry.
Go ahead.
A lot of your buildings and spaces, there's always this somehow element of light or shadow that gives a sense of a presence coming from inside, outside. And now there's this cuts, there's this windows or elements. So I don't know. I find that always very spiritual. There's like something else apart the space, and I find it is very this shadow and light is very important. I don't know if it's me reading something else or I don't know. Do you want
No,
to
I think you're pretty accurate in your assessment. I think we should be sensitive to actually the everyday. We're always, both of us are very curious with mundane things. Just walking along the Shanghai streets, seeing the shadows and the texture and the materiality of the everyday is very inspiring.
I
And
was
we're
looking at your last museum, not museum, theater that you did with the big central element and the light coming
it's an
down.
art center.
Art
The
center.
art center.
Yeah, but it's very powerful. Your attention is really
Thank you.
going in the middle. I thought was I don't know, very, very touching. It could have been also a church in a certain way, because it's a central element and the focus point that was very, very, very strong. But so let's go on this point of, trying to create a space that is also represent ourselves. And now we are also in a business, Valextra is in a business of shops, physical shops. We've done together 2 of them, actually you did them. But
No.
how is going to, virtual versus physical, how do you see that, and how the stores, the malls, and the places where we actually encounter people are going to change?
It's interesting because Valextra as a brand I've always liked, just because the product itself does not rely on it repeating itself. In fact, it is a piece that stands out beautifully if it's in isolation.
Thank you.
If you repeat a lot of Valextra together, it kind of cheapens the product because it's a very beautiful product. One would argue it's a lot of architects' favorite product because it's an very architectural bag, extremely tectonic. So designing for Valextra as a store was rather easy because you don't have to deal with the typical problem of retail clutter. So it's always about creating beautiful pieces and setting them up with a beautiful background. But I think, to answer your question, I think definitely will change. Obviously, online shopping has risen during this period. But I realize people are still very fascinated with a beautiful image. So how it's photographed, how it's set up, whether it's set up in a nice store, how that brand is positioned is still relevant and important. So just because online is now prevalent doesn't mean that you can just be very casual or not be so rigorous with your attitude or your concept.
Have you thought about doing a virtual space, a virtual museum, Has anyone start approaching you guys on something? Everyone is talking about the fact that we have to do virtual showrooms, virtual shopping, virtual. So what
it's
about?
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you should say that. Of course, I can't name names, but there are actually 3 approached us. One for a small pop-up retail store, and 2 others were more brand that we're designing for in Milan. Since they can't show it in Milan, they said, how are we going to position it so people can't see it? How do we approach it so people can experience it, the product, and be able to hopefully understand it within the context of a home or a context of a museum or the store that they would want to put in. So it's not just the physical product and the photographing of the product, but people are doing a lot of renderings.
But so how do we manage to overcome the lack of materiality and the touching feeling that in design and also architecture or the senses with this virtual? Everyone is virtualizing everything, but you just have a few senses involved.
It is a challenge because then it's very much reliant on your ear and your eyes. You can have music and you can have the visual, but you can't touch it, you can't smell, right? So I think it is a challenge. People are using rendering movies to hopefully get that essence in. I'm not so sure if it can replace it.
What do? You overexpose the two senses, or how do you get it to be engaging?
I think that's the challenge, because then everyone's doing major rendering and so saturated to a point where I'm not so sure if that's a solution either, to be honest with you.
Of course. And what about, we were going towards something, and I asked this question to everyone because it's something that is puzzling me. We were talking about sharing economy, B&B, sharing the car. We were trying to reduce waste and improve the sustainability. Now, with the fact that you want to not touch what other people that you don't know have touched. So what do you think is going to happen there? Are we going to go forward and just find a new solutions to avoid the negative, or there's going to be, a turning back on this point?
Well, I think within the context of where we are today, obviously it's very sad because there's a lot of restaurants closing. And community-based businesses that relies on people coming together. The very core of this business is now no longer seen as a positive thing. So I'm quite sad by this. We've designed for many restaurants, and I know the restaurant owners personally, and it is quite depressing to hear their stories. As architects, we're fortunate enough to be able to draw and send drawings, but at the same time we've also been affected. We lost projects. We lost quite a few projects actually in February, and so we have to kind of reinvent ourselves. I think everyone's gonna come out of this eventually. When, how long, I do not know. I think throughout history, we always have gone through, be it epidemic, then pandemic. Obviously, sometimes it becomes endemic, which then becomes part of the grain of our society. HIV is that, right? If I'm not mistaken. So there are things that might not necessarily have the cure right now, but we will have to learn how to live with it. But I do think that as humanity, the need to come together is very important. And I think eventually we will, but perhaps do it differently. And now also having been separated, most of us, I think, especially with Milan, a lot of people complain about Milan, how tiring it is, how difficult it is, how they didn't really have
Salone, now we're talking about the Salone.
Correct.
Yeah,
and then when Salone is taken away from them, you can kind of tell people feel that sense of void, right? And I think there's that appreciation of actually what we have. I think for way too long, things have been way too easy for humanity.
So maybe this will take us a discontinuity that is going to take us forward.
Correct. I do think, I know it sounds dystopic right now. It's very depressing. But I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think there is something to be learned from this. Everyone's been talking about the fact that, at work, for instance, I was presenting yesterday and no one demands me to fly everywhere now. Zoom is prevalent. And for the first time while I'm presenting, I have about 22 people behind me. My whole team that worked on the project actually listened to all the comments that were made. So there is positive to be said. Oftentimes it's always me just presenting with another person, and be it the positive or the negative, only I get to hear it, or the senior individual that flies with me to those destinations. Now it's the whole team. They see the struggle, they see the presentation, they see all the accolades, but at the same time also the criticism. And I think that sense of community is very different, but I think people are probably more engaged, people are probably more switched on, people are probably more connected in a different way.
And do you think people would be more interested in things that are timeless, that have content, or you think they will go more into what I've heard calling it the revenge spending, and so the fact of a self-gratification? Do you think there's going to be a change in this kind of balance, or not really?
Well, I certainly would hope it would change. I certainly hope, you know, people have said that after World War II, people go back to their hedonistic way, and people start spending a lot of money, and people start, you know, almost like, well, we've been isolated for many months. Now it's time to kind of spend and enjoy life, because life is very short. I'm not worried about that. I think the economy will come back because people will actually want to spend more money. I'm actually more worried, Sarah, about the hate that is happening in the world today. There's a lot
the hate.
And bitterness. There's a lot of blame, you know, U.S. and China, you know, Europe and U.S., Europe and China, Asia, and all these. And there's just a lot of back and forth. And that really saddens me. It does.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I was imagining that in a moment where we all living the same troubles, there would be a sense of unity, and so I'm a little bit surprised, but voila.
So am I.
I'm very naive, so.
But so am I. I think the dialogue and the discussion that you hear nowadays, the press that's coming out. I mean, I'm not just talking about one-sided. I'm saying both sides. I mean, all around the world, there's just a lot of, you know, different discourses, and a lot of them are negative, and it is quite disconcerting.
And so, what we can do as non-politician, non-journalist, you know, for me, these interviews are also part of thinking together now about what's today and what's the future. So is there anything that we can do from our platforms to help us thinking in a little bit more solidarity and a unified way, or not really? I'm losing you. Hello? I've lost you. Hello. Okay, I'm having a moment of here we go. Back again. Yes. No, I found you, Linda.
Okay.
Yes. It's fine. No more. Every time. So I found you again. So
no worries.
What can we do as you know, as not part of the elite of politician or journalist? Is there any role that we can have in this?
I do think, despite the negativity, I do see a number of people that are taking initiatives, be it in the academic world, you know, in different groups. I see people making, you know, masks and shields. I see a number of architects in the Philippines doing temporary shelter for hospitals that are overcrowded. I do see people sending masks to
other countries. We've been benefiting a lot in Italy from everyone, Albanian, Russian, Chinese. So we're very grateful, I think. So going back to the point about your work, and is there anything that you would love to do that could somehow contribute to this change? Is there a project that maybe you always wanted to do, but even more today becomes relevant?
Well, I think there's always let me start by saying that there's always a project that I'm not that interested in doing, but it's making me think right now. the idea of clinics and hospital, anything that is medically related, I'm not that interested in the first place. Not because I don't like the architecture. I just don't like doctors, and I'm afraid of doctors myself. And I'm always fearful of the smell. But having seen all these shelters that are being done precisely because of all the situations that's happening in the world, made me realize that as an architect, I think we do have that responsibility. And if we can help, I think it would be very good. One other project that I thought would be interesting would be, you know, orphanage and housing, because I think with this COVID-19, I think the people that are really affected are the poor, not so much the rich. Yeah, because the rich are in houses that are quite comfortable. They might have 12 rooms and there's only 3 of them or 4 of them, so they can go from one room to another every day. So there's always a, you know, I was just reading New York Times, or I was watching one of the story of a couple with 6 kids and 3 rooms. So do the math, right? 8 of them, 3 rooms. I believe it's in the Harlem area, and you can kind of see sort of the image of cramped spaces and how they have to, and they have 6 kids running around, and it's intense if you have no way out.
To be honest, it's intense. It's intense in general also, no? Like we're not used to stay in the house all together for so long. Even if you're not in a strong family where you know, there's understanding and love, it can become very complicated. But also for people that are by themselves. You know, I have friends that have been closed in their home for more than 60 days by themselves, where the only way to connect is the phone. It's quite alienating, you know? And even more if you're poor, it becomes. And this is something that you have touched even before this situation. Now you've done the unfolding villages and the disappearance of villages, and even if it's a little bit different, there is the concept of the elderly being the more affected, and beautiful and amazing things disappearing. So how do you think you know, we can preserve this our history, our essence, our traditions, and
we've been talking about the issue on reflective nostalgia. I mean, it's coined by Svetlana Boym, a Harvard scholar, and she was defining the difference between restorative nostalgia and reflective nostalgia, and how understanding the essence of our past, trying to find meaning in it and appropriating them for what we do today, I think is very important. Oftentimes in our rat race to do something new, to do something bigger, faster, we often do not take the time to think back. And so I think while I understand the pain of people who are stuck by themselves for 60 days, I certainly hope that, because I'm only stuck for 14 days in that hotel room, so it's a little different, I know. Granting I didn't have a kitchen, but the key was, I think hopefully it will allow us individually to be able to look back rather than constantly looking forward.
And this is important in all your work. There's been, or at least there's a lot of remaining truthful to tradition, and the past is a big role to build the present and to build the future. And what is, you think, the piece of information that needs to remain in our heads coming out from this situation?
I think authenticity. I think honesty and authenticity. I think oftentimes if we can deal with honesty and authenticity, I think we will get out of this rather quite healthily. I think if you think about when you're struggling with, I don't know, you're with your family right now. You
Yes.
know, obviously there's a lot of issues of facade, and certain authenticity will have to come out through the course of your quarantine and your lockdown. And I think it's the same with spaces. I think it's understanding what is essential for each space and making sure that we defend them very strongly, the very core of be it typology, rather than just looking at other places and saying, well, that's very nice, let me just incorporate that. Understanding materiality and local culture and why they are significant, they became where it is, rather than just importing a particular method of living, a particular typology, and incorporating in a society, in a local context. I think will help each and every one of us.
And you do not only architecture, but you also produce objects. What do you think, what's your focus in this moment? What kind of objects do you think will have a special meaning for us, if any?
It's interesting because I think we are now asked to do our brief. Actually, surprisingly, a lot of them have changed a little bit. Many of the briefs that are coming in, and I actually agree with them, are furniture that are flexible. Furniture that can adapt to many things. And we had submitted a number of products to brands that were rejected about 4 months ago. And I think some of them, in fact, 2 of them came back and said, actually, we want it now. And when you think about it, these are products that perhaps are seen as too flexible and not as iconic, perhaps not as strong, maybe too flexible, too practical. But then they're realizing that these are things that people actually need.
Maybe that's a very interesting point. And now it's not only about something, a wow effect. We're going back to put at the center the functionality with beauty, and not just something that wows you. And I think that's really also the center of design, and now the combination of the 2 elements. And so I want to go back to something that I kind of moved it out, but because in the meantime I was thinking about it a little bit. This theme about people that are living in houses and that are small, maybe they have less possibility than space. What do you think they could do? Object, color, little thing that would not be expensive, that could help them create an environment that is just slightly more comforting, and maybe focusing their attention on the beauty also of a difficult situation. Is there anything like a color, or I don't know? I can think about a flower, no, like buying a flower every week, one. Yeah,
I actually think of if you treat the objects in your house as characters, that's part of your family, and you move them around like the way you would move around. I think that in itself is probably inexpensive. You get good exercise, and it allows you to have a different domestic space. I think it also starts questioning by having a piece in a corner of a room that has high ceiling as opposed to low ceiling might change the way that furniture is seen or perceived, or you experience. Rosanna and I tend to move things around, especially Rosanna. I wish she was here to defend herself. She drives me crazy, but then by doing this, actually it allows us to understand both the space and the object. So there's always that relationship. There's no such thing as the space is more dominant than the object, and vice versa. So we're dealing with art.
So people should
architecture interior.
So people should just look at their pieces, their favorite pieces, try to move them around, and finding a new balance, and put the things that they love in a prominent position. So every time they look at that, it's going to make them feel happier. That's
Yeah,
nice.
and you know, when I was quarantined in a one-bedroom hotel, I had no choice. I still had to do my sketches, you know, and photograph them and send to my team here. But I start sketching sitting down on a toilet, which I've never done, you know. Even when I don't need to be in a toilet, you know, I hate working sitting down on my bed. Rosanna loves to do that. I hate to do it, but I did it, you know, because sometimes I'm just too tired. And for the first few days, I didn't even have a chair in my room. So I think also try to be creative in you know, the notion of what things should be. Oftentimes we always think, well, if we have to draw, we need a desk and we need a chair. When we sleep, we need a bed. There's always this definition that the society gives us, and we're born with it without questioning it. And so maybe by actually changing where we draw, where we eat, you know, I was forced to actually, I had a little pot, I had to force to cook in the toilet, and it's actually quite efficient. You know, there's a sink over there, and you could throw away into your toilet. So there's actually a lot of things you can learn when you're forced to be in a situation that's very different.
So Linda, I'm going to ask a couple of really more day-by-day questions, but I'm interested to know also, who cooks in your home? Are you cooking? Is Rosanna cooking? Are your kids cooking? Who's the...
Both of us cook. But we cook very differently, and we cannot cook together.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, just this lunchtime, Rosanna was cooking, which was great. She's an amazing cook. We both love to cook. I'm a messy cooker, so I prepare everything. I don't prepare everything. Everything is a mess. It's like a war zone, the kitchen. Rosanna needs to prepare everything, needs to be very clean. Everything needs to be neat and quite rigorous before the cooking begins. I'm cooking and I'm like, oh, I'm missing certain things. And so it's very different. But at the end, you know, we're happy that our kids like our food.
No, but it's interesting because a lot of the architects and designers that I've had the luck of talking with in these days, they all they like using their hands. So the fact of being in the kitchen is a moment to actually find that they can do again. And so I was curious to know.
I didn't think that. That's interesting because I realized that.
Everyone has told us that they really find pleasure and relief also in cooking. It's a moment of...
You know, it was interesting because when we were quarantined in a hotel here, one room, every day we're allowed to have a package that would be sent in. But no food is allowed. They feed you. No food is allowed. Whoa, see, the thing is turning. Sorry. I don't know what happened here. Oh, well, I have to move my chair. So no food is allowed. No food is allowed. So only paperwork, and not even drinks are allowed. So what happened was I would illegally have people send eggs, you know, and Chinese sausage over, because when I have nothing to do, I actually love cooking. So it was actually great. All those 14 days, I spent a lot of time cooking.
Okay. And what was the first thing you did when you came out? Like the most instinctive thing that you... Everyone asked me, what am I going to do when everything is going to be back? And I said, I want a coffee from a bar. I don't know why. I'm not even a lover of that, but it's a routine that signs the coming back.
You know, it's interesting you should say that, because I went to a place here in Shanghai called 100% Coffee, which is they're a very good coffee maker. And I went to a bakery and got myself an almond. You know what an almond look? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got an almond because I think that's Rosanna's favorite, and a cup of latte. And,
okay.
Yeah.
So that's and what have you bought during this period? Have you bought anything?
Rosanna bought a lot of things online. I mean,
So she did. So she did
she
buy
did
a lot. Okay.
everything that was needed in the house that she never bought. Very practical things, shelving, utensils that were missing all these years. And again, that's what I'm saying. It's a good metaphor. Things that we actually need, um, we don't take care of ourselves, you know. And we manage to also make appointments to see doctors for all the ailments we have.
Of course. So a DIY and taking care. And what about traveling? What do you think is, when do you think you're going to start reconsidering the traveling?
We've all canceled. All our flights been canceled here. So I'm actually very happy, Sarah. You know,
Of
Rosanna and I
course.
travel like mad,
Crazy.
and so we're extremely we're thrilled actually that in many ways we don't have to travel, and it's actually giving us a lot of rest. So I don't know the foreseeable future. There are, in fact, in China, it's really strict because if you travel, when you come back, it's another 14 days of quarantine. So, you know, I
So
think I have enough.
you're planning to spend your time in Shanghai this summer, or going and checking
Most probably.
China? Or most probably.
Most probably. Yeah.
And what about the time that you're spending with your family and your kids that are back? It's
great.
finally you're together.
I'm not so sure if it's great for them, but it's definitely great for us. I think we've been wanting for many years. I think a part of us sending them to prep school outside of China also made us realize that we miss them a lot. But I think it's great to have them be with us and seeing them actually being very serious about what they're studying. And we can even discuss what they're studying. So I think it's been good.
Okay,
I'm sorry, the film is moving.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
But so I'm the moments that you are spending together is what, mainly the dinners, or now that you're back in the studio, or do you have some time or not really?
So we've been spending time the last 2 weeks, right? Because we were all at home.
Okay.
The week before we were all quarantined. The 2 weeks before we were quarantined,
Exactly.
so we were separated. I'm trying to spend half of my time at home, working at home, and half of time in the office.
Okay, so now that, no, I'm asking because we are all together in our homes with our kids, which is really great. And, you know, so somehow we want to go back to work, but there's something quite beautiful and special about this time.
I think you will realize once you go back to work, it will also be very different. Things will change a little bit. You'll feel a little strange at first. You have to get used to that. Certainly did for me after coming back
maybe
here.
I ask you this last question because we have 5 minutes. So what is your recommendation to our Valextra team? And now we are spending a lot of time in thinking about what is really relevant for people. And, you know, we're selling a luxury product that is not essential. So as a brand and as a creator of products, what could we do? I know it's a difficult question, but it's really the question that we're asking ourselves in these days.
I think it is a very difficult question. I think, but for...
How can we use our spaces, for example? Like we have shops in the most incredible places in the... What can we do to be more real, more honest, and more relevant to this new world?
I think first, I think Valextra has always been known to be a brand that does quality products. I think you guys need to continue to do that. Mm-hmm. I think, and don't shy away from. I think there's a difference between luxury and quality. Mm-hmm. And I think if I were to think about Valextra, it's not so much about luxury, but quality. And I think there's a fine line there. It's important to stress the fact that if you buy this product, it's not about buying more of Valextra, but hoping that this product will be given to the next generation. And I know that's not necessarily commercially a very good advice, but I think given the situation that we are in, I think having this heritage and lineage is even more important. It is a way for us to understand our past in order for us to survive for the future. But I think if I have one advice to the Valextra team before any product, I think it's important to use the idea of this lockdown as a metaphor to search within ourselves and see what is wrong within our inner home, our inner selves, because we are, in many ways, we have a home within. So you might not be, if once you're free and the virus is over, we still have to deal with ourselves. And if we're in denial of who we are, we're in many ways, we're still in lockdown mode. You understand?
Of
we're
course.
not free.
It's a very...
And so there's a lot of facade in this society. And I think once we get out of that, I think we're going to be a better, we're going to be better people.
So I'm going to show you, I have a lot of notes of all the things he told me. So I'm going to keep a very good note. For me, these conversations are really a moment of growth and very inspiring. And I love you and Rosanna a lot. We met
love you too.
in
Yes.
in a long, like 5 years ago in London. And I have to say, since then, there's been a really a connection. I've been lucky to work on 2 stories with you, but
amazing experience. Yeah.
I really hope, you know, for me, I like what Rodolfo Dordoni said. Now it's not about product, it's about people. And so I thank you so much that you gave me this possibility to have a chat with you. And
yes, no, thank you.
And
I
apologize
really
that
Rosanna. Yeah, I apologize. Rosanna could not come. You know.
It's okay.
But she sent her regards and love and sent her apologies as well. Yes.
Of course, we need to do something together. Really,
yes.
I think thinking about this new phase. I love the idea. I'm going to take with me the hospital, the orphanage, and the lockdown that we have to, of each of us, that we have to take over. So thank you so much. We're going to have next week, we're going to have Michael Anastasiades with us. I know that you sell also his product. And
beautiful product. Beautiful product.
We love him a lot.
Yeah, he's a good man.
I would love also to have maybe later a conversation with Rosanna. I think we need more women. More women.
Yes. Thank
it's
you.
so difficult to find women. Anyway, I'm not a feminist, but I like the
No,
the
I agree. It should be actually the best is when it's the 2 of us. And she decided, you know, Lyndon, you do this. No, she had to see it. She had to go to a doctor today.
No, but I think it's good to have a one-by-one on this kind of conversation. Often works, but maybe we can convince her to come online and on a conversation with us in the next future.
Oh, I'm sure she will oblige.
Thank you again. Send love.
All right, bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye,
Ciao,
and
ciao.
take care.
Ciao, ciao.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Of course.